Ta'ala bless all of you here and all the mu'mineen, those who believe in the wilayat of Ali bin Abi Talib on this very important occasion in our history, which is the Eid of the perfection of Islam. It is the Eid where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completed His blessings on the Muslims in form of the guidance which would have stopped with Nubuwwat, but Allah extended that in the form of Imamat. And this completion of Islam and the perfection of Islam basically materialized in form of the wilayat of Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. MashaAllah, we are talking to the audience of those who are in the wilayat of Ali bin Abi Talib. Those who take pride in calling themselves the Shia of Ali. Those who believe in the concept that Rasulullah presented to the Muslims in Ghadir on the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I would like to just start with the narration in a different way, that this was the largest gathering that the Prophet witnessed in his life. He had never seen so many people gathered in one place at one time before Ghadir or after Ghadir. And so this was a very important moment in his life. And based on that ayat of Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded him, Ya ayyuha rasul balligh ma unzila ilayk, and you know the rest of the story. He conveyed the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about the concept of wilayat and leadership of Ali bin Abi Talib after himself. And the way the historians talk about it, I would like to just go to the poetry of Hassan bin Thabit. Hassan bin Thabit is a Muslim from Medina. He's a Madani. And he was a very accomplished poet in his own right. He was there even in the events before Ghadir. Whenever he was present in the important events which took place in the life of the Prophet, he would ask permission to preserve that event in the words of poetry. You know, we would call him the Shair of Darbar of Rasulullah, the official poet of Rasul. And it's very interesting that, after this event of Ghadir, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent this ayat and the Prophet implemented the command, and after giving the message, he asked the people to congratulate Amir al-Mu'mineen, to congratulate Ali as Amir al-Mu'mineen. After all this, Hassan came to Rasulullah. And then he says, إِعِذًا لِي يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ أَقُولُ فِي عَلِيٍّ أَبْيَاطًا. O the Prophet, allow me to compose some lines of poetry regarding Ali on this occasion. And what did the Prophet say? He says, قُلْ عَلَى بَرَكَةِ اللَّهِ. O Hassan, do that. Present the lines of poetry that you have composed extempore in your mind, ala barakatillah, with the barakat and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This mahfil of Ghadir is not the first one. That was the first one. Where the Shair comes to Rasulullah and he says, I would like to recite poetry in praise of Ali. And Rasulullah says, yes, do that, ala barakatillah. What you are doing here, gathering and having this celebration, reciting poetry, remembering the event, this is the continuation of the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Although he didn't say a very long poem here, just few lines. But it's very crucial from our point of view because you see, all serious scholars of Islam, those who are not from the Shia school of thought, they do not deny what happened in Ghadir. They do not even deny what the Prophet said about Ali. When he says, Man kuntu mawlahu fahada aliyun mawla. But what do? They say, well, mawla means a friend. It has nothing to do with the issue of vilayat and leadership. And so they come to that extent of accepting the fact of history that this happened, and this is what Rasulullah said, but it has nothing to do with the issue of leadership of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And so now we are talking about the words. What does it mean? When the Prophet said this, what was the meaning of it? You have somebody like Hassan bin Thabit, not an ignorant Bedouin from the Arabian Peninsula, an urbanite from Medina, a learned person, a poet of the Darbar of Rasulullah. See how he understood the words of Rasulullah in Ghadir, because he paraphrases the words of Rasulullah in his own words. And so this piece of poetry from Hassan bin Thabit is very, very important for us, where he says, يناديهم يوم الغدير نبيهم بخم وعسمع بالرسول مناديا فقال فمن مولاكم ونبيكم فقالوا ولم يبدو هناك الطعاميا إلهك مولانا وأنت نبينا ولم تلق منا في الولاية عاصيا. And then he continues, فقال له قم يا علي فإنني رضيتك من بعدي إماما وهاديا فمن كنت مولاه فهذا وليه فكونوا له أتباع صدق مواليا هناك دعا اللهم والي وليه وكن للذي عاد عليا معاديا. Now you would say, I'm just reciting in Arabic and people don't understand it. There was a reason for that. Now I want to do the translation without going through the Arabic, because then it will be interrupted in between. And if you look at the way he understood the words of Rasulullah, and then he put it in his own poetic form, where he says, on the day of Ghadir, their prophet was calling at Khum, and I heard the prophet summoning. Who is your master and Nabi? Was his question. They responded to him without any hesitation. Your Lord is our master and you are his emissary. You wouldn't find us challenging your authority. So he said, stand up, O Ali, for you I prefer to be after me their guide and leader. فقال له قم يا علي فإنني رضيتك من بعد إماما وهاديا. He's explaining the words Mawla as Imam and Hadiya. So he said, stand up, O Ali, for you I prefer to be after me their guide and leader. Whomsoever master I am, this is his master. So be true followers of your new master. Then he prayed, O Allah, love one who loves Ali, and be an enemy of one who is enemy of Ali. Salawat. Rasulullah didn't correct him. That, oh, you didn't understand what I was saying. I was just saying Ali was your enemy before, now he has become your friend. No, he didn't say that. He actually confirmed the understanding that Hassan has in his words, that I am pleased with Ali as Imam and Wahadiya, as the leader and the guide. Min ba'di, after me. And not only that, when he presented his poetry, the Prophet prayed for him. لا تزال يا حسان مؤيدا بروح القدس. O Hassan, you will always be supported by the malak, by the angel. ما نصرتنا بلسانك, as long as you support us by your words. If the Prophet prays for you in a conditional form, be careful. Because at the end, what does he say? He says, you are always under the support of an angel as long as you support us with your tongue. So there is a chance that in future something can go wrong with the person. And this is where we have to pray for the aqibat, that the end should be on the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, risalat of Muhammad, and vilayat of Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Salawat alayhi. This was not the Prophet's personal decision and choice, especially the wordings. In Quran, many places Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the Prophet with Ya Ayyuhan Nabi, which is a kind of a letter form of address. Or sometimes the names are there. Taha, Yasin, Muzammil, Mudassir, different titles. Only 2 places Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the Prophet with his very serious position of risalat. Ya ayyuhar Rasul. And one of them is this ayat. O the messenger. Now I'm not talking to you like a Nabi, because Nabi is somebody who receives the naba, the news from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is not obliged necessarily in every case to convey it to people. That is the function of the Nabi. Whereas Rasul is somebody who gets the message with the duty of conveying it to the ummah. And so that address is very important. Ya ayyuhar Rasul, balligh ma unzila ilayka min rabbik. Convey the message which has been sent down to you from your Lord. And if you don't do it, then the process of guidance will be incomplete. It will be as if you have not completed your mission of risalat. فَمَا بَلَّغْتَ رِسَالَتُهُ. You have not conveyed his message to the people. And don't worry about those who might say things about you, that you are the father-in-law, you are the cousin, therefore you are preferring him. Leave that problem for me. We will protect you against the people. And so it was a very serious matter that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed at that time. And this was based on the choice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. The ayat that I recited earlier from Surah Yunus. There Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us an indication of what is his choice when it comes to leadership and guidance. Although the ayat is about himself, but we can derive a general standard for leadership. The ayat says, أَفَمَنْ يَهْدِ إِلَى الْحَقِّ أَحَقُّ أَنْ يُتَّبَعَ. The one who guides you to the truth, to the right path, is he the one who is more deserving to be followed, or somebody who cannot guide you until he is guided by somebody else? Although the ayat is specifically about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we can derive the general standard there. If you have people in the ummah where all of them would be in need of somebody else's guidance before they can guide you, and then if there is someone who doesn't need guidance from anyone because he is blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with hidayat and nur, who is to be preferred? فَمَا لَكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, what is the matter with you? I have given you aql. What kind of judgment are you making in this matter of leadership? With the presence of Ali in the ummah after Rasulullah, there was no one, absolutely no one who would come even close to the conditions and the qualities required for leadership. Yes, we are Shias, we talk about this quite a lot. But tonight I would like to present to you the perspective of a Sunni scholar. Somebody who lived in the 6th century of the Islamic era by the name of Ibn Abil Hadid. He was a Mu'tazili Sunni scholar, And he wrote the commentary of Nahj al-Balagha in 20 volumes, a very extensive commentary of Nahj al-Balagha. In the very first volume, he has a section on the biography of Amir al-Mu'mineen. There he says few things which are very interesting, and I wanted to share with you tonight. Salawat Quran Akbar. I didn't see when I said on the minbar, so I don't know the timing. So tonight is Ghadir, so you'll excuse me for that. Ibn Abi al-Hadid al-Mu'tazili says, what do I say about a person whose enemies and opponents confess his virtues, and they have not been able to deny his qualities or conceal his fazail? You verily know that Banu Umayyah occupied Islamic rule in the east and the west, and tried by all means to put down his light, to invent weaknesses in his character, to abuse him on all the members on Fridays, and threaten his admirers. Rather, they were imprisoned and killed, and forbade narration of any hadith in his praise or which elevated his memory. They even discourage anyone to be named, any child to be named after Ali. All this did nothing but added to the elevation and greatness of the status of Ali bin Abi Talib. He says he is like a musk. Even if you put a cover on it, the fragrance will still spread through. He is like the sun. Wind would be there, sandstorm would be there, but the sun would still be visible. He says he is like the daylight, which will be perceived by many, even though the blind one would not be able to see it. It doesn't mean physically blind here. And then he goes on to say, what do I say about a person whom every group and sect in Islam tries to relate him to itself? He is indeed the head of all virtues, and he is the spring of the qualities of human beings. And then he explains that when he says every group tries to relate itself to him, he gives the example of the most important sciences that we have in Islam. He says the most noble of all the sciences in Islam is theology. Because theology deals with divinity, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with aqeedah. And he says if you look at the Muslim world, you will see that all the schools of thought, directly or indirectly, end with Ali as the supreme teacher. And then, he describes that, for example, we are talking about the formal schools of theology in the Sunni world. And he says, as far as Shias are concerned, we know they follow him anyway. They claim to be his followers. So I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about the others. He says, look at the first formal school of theology known as Mu'tazila. This was founded by a person by the name of Wasil bin Atta, who was a student of Abu Hashim. Abu Hashim Abdullah is son of Muhammad Hanafiya. And Muhammad Hanafiya is the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. This school of thought continued for about 2 to 3 centuries. In the later Abbasid period, they basically were wiped out in a way. Another group came to power, which is still in force. All the Sunnis in their aqeedah, in their theology, they follow the Ash'ari school of thought, the theological school. And Ash'ari school of thought, the founder is Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. And his teacher, al-Jubai, was a Mu'tazili, because they came out of the Mu'tazila school and formed his own theology and ideas. So he says, even if you look at the present Ash'ari school of thought, it can be traced back to the Mu'tazila, and the Mu'tazila trace their line of disciples and masters back to Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Salawat alayhi. Then he looks at fiqh. And again, we are not dealing with the Shia fiqh. We know it goes straight from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq to his forefathers going to Ali. He says, look at the Sunni fuqaha. The earliest one are Malik and Abu Hanifa. They are contemporaries. And they lived at the time of the sixth Imam. He says, Malik bin Anas, who was in Medina, he studied under Rabi'a. Rabi'a studied under Ikrama. Ikrama studied under Abdullah ibn Abbas, who was the cousin of Ali and a student of Ali. So he says, even the Maliki school, if you look at the founder and his teachers, across the generation goes back to Ali bin Abi Talib. Then you have his contemporary, the Hanafi school. The founder is Abu Hanifa. And when you look at the Abu Hanifa's school and those who formalized it and spread it, there also he says, he basically studied at least for 2 years, we know, under Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. And Ibn Abi al-Hadid Mu'tazili then says, he connects Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq to the 5th Imam, to the 4th Imam, 3rd Imam, and then to Ali bin Abi Talib. Shafi'i, he says, he basically studied through a student of Abu Hanifa. So you can trace that line back to Abu Hanifa, to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, to Ali bin Abi Talib. And when it comes to the Hanbali, he basically studied under Shafi'i and the students of Shafi'i, and that also is connected to Ali bin Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam. Salawat alayhi barat. He says, even before this school of theology and schools of jurisprudence came to exist in the Sunni world, what about the era of the Sahaba? He says there was nobody absolutely among the Sahaba who ever, claimed to know more than Ali. He says they used to go, even though they were Khulafa, they used to go to Ali to get solution to their judgments and their problem. And he says, remember the words of the second Khalifa, لولا Ali لحلك Umar. Or his other words, لا بقيت معضلة ليس فها لها أبو الحسن. That, oh Allah, don't bring any problem to me, but that Abu al-Hasan be there to resolve it. And this ayat comes back to the mind. أَفَمَنْ يَهْدِي إِلَى الْحَقِّ أَحَقُّ أَنْ يُتَّبَعْ أَمَّنْ لَا يَهْدِي إِلَّا أَنْ يُهْدَى. Should you follow somebody who can, guide you directly, or should you follow somebody who needs the guidance of somebody else to guide you? And this is where, he actually quotes a statement that during the time of the second Khalifa, he issued a verdict saying nobody will sit in the masjid to give fatwa when Ali bin Abi Talib is inside the masjid. Nobody has a right to do that when Ali is present inside the masjid. Then he goes on and says, look at the science of tafsir. Majority of the Sunni Mufassirin, when they look at the narrations and the views of the early scholars, it goes back to Abdullah ibn Abbas. They consider him to be the master of the tafsir of Quran. He was known as Hibrul Ummah, the ink of the Ummah. And if you look at the life of Abdullah ibn Abbas, he was a Shia of Ali bin Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam. Salawat alayhi. Ibn Abi al-Hadid Mu'tazili quotes a statement that somebody asked Abdullah ibn Abbas, أين علمك من علم ابن عمك? Your knowledge compared to the knowledge of your cousin, referring to Ali. How do you compare your knowledge to his knowledge? And he says, كالنسبة قطرة من المطر إلى البحر المحيط. He says, my knowledge compared to the knowledge of Ali is like one drop of the rain falling into the vast ocean. He is the vast ocean of knowledge. I am just one drop in that. And so we see that, as far as his fazail are concerned, the excellent qualities that Amir al-Mu'minin has, nobody has ability to deny them. They try quite a lot. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed that He is going to preserve His nur. Even if you look at the spiritual paths in the world of Islam, Ibn Abi al-Hadid al-Mu'tazili doesn't go into details, but if you look at all the silsila of the Sufis, Sufis have this tradition where you have the Shaykh and the Murshid, you have to do bay'at on his hand, pledge allegiance, and you have to follow him in everything. We have a problem with doing taqleed of the maraji. They didn't even do anything to you. They just give you the masail in general. This is halal, this is haram. What do you do in your life? They are not concerned with that. But among the Sufis, the Shaykh and the Murshid has absolute control on you, whatever you do. And they have many, many silsilas. Silsilas means the chain, referring to the silsila of the master and the disciples. And they trace it all the way back. What is amazing about the Sufi silsilas, all of them, without any exception, go back to one or the other of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt. Either Imam Riza alayhi salam, or Imam Musa al-Kazim, or Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, Imam Zainul Abidin, and there is only one group. And through the Imams, they go to Amir al-Mu'mineen and they say he is the master of the spiritual masters. He is the supreme, spiritual master of all. There is only one group, which is known as Naqshbandi. And they traced their chain and silsila all the way to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And then through his mother's side, they go to Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. And from Muhammad bin Abu Bakr, they trace their line to Abu Bakr. The problem is they don't know history. Because if you study the life of Muhammad bin Abu Bakr, he was less than 3 years old when his father died. Muhammad bin Abi Bakr was raised by Amir al-Mu'mineen. Whatever he knows about Islam is from Amir al-Mu'mineen. He was a Shia of Ali. He was killed by the forces of Muawiyah because he was very close companion and a son, like a son to Amir al-Mu'mineen. So these people should actually divert that line. Even if they go from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq through his mother's line to Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, that line should go back to Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wasalam. Salawatullah. And so what is left there? That people would abandon Ali for what? You want your theology, it comes from Ali. You want your fiqh and jurisprudence, it comes from Ali. You want your tafsir, it comes from Ali. You want your spirituality, it comes from Ali. You want to learn the Arabic eloquence and clarity of the language, it comes from Ali. Everything that you see as far as Islam is concerned and the sciences of Islam, Ali is the spring of that. He is the source of all goodness which exists in the Muslim world. Salawat. Then Ibn Abi al-Hadid al-Mu'tazili goes on to say, if you look at the personal character of Amir al-Mu'mineen, nobody can be compared to him. He says, look at courage. He says, Ali is the only warrior who never was required to strike second time. One strike was more than enough. He never had to go and hit that, his target again. Then he says, look at the issue of the physical strength. He said nobody was able to, take out the gate of Khaybar, but Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says not only in the battleground. You look at the issue of generosity and charity. Ayat of Quran praise Amir al-Mu'mineen. Look at the issue of patience and forbearance in dealing with the enemies. And he gives examples. How he dealt with Marwan, how he dealt with Abdullah ibn Zubayr, how he dealt with Muawiyah, how he dealt with Aisha, and all others. And he himself cites all these examples and says, this is where you see the hilm and sabr of Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Salawat alayhi wa sallam. So you want to go into spirituality and mihrab, Ali is the first. You want to go into courage and battlefield, Ali is there. If you want to see somebody very eloquent and clear in his speech and the content that he delivers on the mimbar, Ali is the first one. If you want to see a leader who lives a simple life, where even the poor can relate to him, you will see that example in Ali bin Abi Talib. In every dimension of what we call al-insanul kamil, you will see the personality of Amir al-Mu'mineen shining over all others. Salawat alayhi wa sallam. Even non-Muslims, even now, after centuries, it was probably in 2002, when the United Nations Agency of Development for the Middle East issued its report about the Arab countries. They made certain suggestions more than 10 years ago now, asking the Arab countries to, make their societies better. They gave some suggestions and some ideas. But just to make sure that they buy into that idea, they said, we don't ask you to follow Europe and the West. He says, you don't need to do that. You look at your own history. And they selected passages from the letter that Amir al-Mu'mineen had written to Malik Ashtar. And they said, look at it. Look at your own history. You already have example how you can reform your societies and make yourselves better. 10 years has passed from that advice given by UN to Arab societies. What are they doing? It's the same old story. What happened during the early days is happening again. Yes, we have so-called Arab Spring. But instead of going towards the seerah and example of Amir al-Mu'mineen, they have taken the tradition of Banu Umayyah, killing non-Muslims, destroying their places of worship, beheading the people, taking out organs from the body and trying to, bite on it. These are all Umayyi, traits that we see. Whereas even United Nations is saying to them, look at the example of your own leader in the past in form of Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam. Salawat alayhi wa sallam. Especially Egypt. It's really it's a great tragedy for the Muslim world of the contemporary times. That they got rid of the dictator and then basically went towards Salafism. There's the same land where Amir al-Mu'mineen sends Malik Ashtar with a document where the famous words of Ali was there. Remember, you're going to a multi-faith society. Deal with them with kindness. Create this sense of rahmah in your heart for your citizens. Because all of them are either imma akhun laka fi ad-din aw nadhirun laka fi al-khalq. Either they are brethren in faith or they are similar to you in humanity. Look at them from that perspective. And so Ali is not only a legacy of the past and an example to be studied in the museum. The example of Ali is an example relevant to us in the 21st century also. And that is why you have people like George Jordan, who are not from Muslim background, writing the book about Ali, and the title he gives, that Ali is Sawtul Adalat al-Insaniya. Ali is the voice of human justice. If you want to have justice around the world, we have to go back to the seerah of Ali bin Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam, because Allah chose him and Rasulullah appointed him on the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Ghadir as a leader and imam and hadi for the Muslims and the humanity at large. Salawat padhne ek baar aur. ابو ذر غفاری نے ایک جملہ کہا تھا مسلمانوں سے رسول کے وفات کے بعد، جب لوگ غدیر کی ولایت سے منحرف ہو گئے. وہ جملہ یہ تھا کہ اگر تم نے اس ہدایت کو مانا ہوتا تو خدا بند عالم آسمان سے اتنے برکات نازل کرتا، زمین کے خزانوں کو تمہارے لیے کھول دیتا جس کا احساس تمہیں نہیں ہے. امت اس وقت بھی محروم رہی اپنے کرتوت کی وجہ سے. افسوس یہ ہے کہ ابھی بھی ذلت کے علاوہ انہیں کچھ نہیں مل رہا ہے، اس لیے کہ یہ اس راستے پر نہیں جا رہے ہیں جو علی کا راستہ تھا، وہ راستہ جو رسول نے غدیر میں بتایا تھا، اب بالکل کلیئرلی بیان کیا تھا، بلکہ اس راستے پر جا رہے ہیں جو بالکل ہی اپوزٹ ہے. یعنی اگر یہ کسی اور راستے پر جاتے تو ایک بات بھی ہے، نہیں وہ تو بالکل اموی اسٹائل پہ جا رہے ہیں. جو اپنے کو مسلمان کہتے ہیں بہت ہی جنت کے متمنی ہیں. اور جہاں تک غدیر کی بات ہے، یہ نہیں ہے کہ علی نے اس کی بات نہ کی ہو، چونکہ ہم نے شروع انگریزی میں کیا تھا حسان بن ثابت کے اشعار سے، اردو میں ہم ختم کرنا چاہیں گے امیر المومنین کے اشعار سے. ایک بار معاویہ نے خط لکھا تھا امیر المومنین کے نام پرووک کرنے کے لیے. اس میں ایک جملہ تھا، ان لی فضائل، کہ ہمارے بہت سے فضائل ہیں. کان ابی سیدن فی الجاہلیہ، میرا باپ جو ہے جاہلیت کے زمانے میں سردار تھا. وصرت ملکن فی الاسلام، اور ہم جو ہیں اسلام میں کنگ بن گئے ہیں. وانا سحر رسول اللہ، اور ہماری رشتہ داری ہے رسول سے، رسول اللہ ہمارے بہنوئی ہوتے ہیں. وخال المؤمنین، اور اس رشتے سے ہم مومنین کے ماموں ہوتے ہیں. وکاتب الوحی، امیر المومنین نے جب خط دیکھا تو اپنے کاتب کو بلایا کہ اچھا یہ اپنے فضائل سے ہم پر جو ہے وہ اپنے فوقیت ثابت کرنا چاہتا ہے. کاتب سے کہا کہ لکھو. علی نے جواب دیا ہے شعر کی زبان میں، محمد النبی اخی و سنوی و حمزۃ سید الشہداء عمی. تم اپنے بزرگوں کی بات کر رہے ہو جاہلیت کے زمانے کی. محمد جو نبی ہیں وہ میرے بھائی ہیں، تمہارے تو بہنوئی ہوئے. ہمارے تو بھائی ہیں، بلکہ he was like a twin to me. سنوی اور حمزہ سید الشہداء، جن کو سید الشہداء کہتے ہیں عالم اسلام میں اس زمانے میں، وہ ہمارے چچا تھے. وجعفر الذي يضحى ويمسي يطور مع الملائكة ابن عمی، وہ جعفر جو شہید ہوئے رسول کے زمانے میں اور جو ملائکہ کے ساتھ سیر کرتے ہیں، خدا نے ان کو پر دیے ہیں. ابن عمی، یہ میرے بھائی ہیں، سگے بھائی ہیں. وبنت محمد سکنی وعرسی منوط لحمها بدمی ولحمی، اور رسول کی جو بیٹی ہے وہ ہمارے گھر ہے، وہ میری بیوی ہے، اور وہ ہماری ڈیپینڈنٹ ہے، اور ہمارے ساتھ اس کے ساتھ خون اور روح کا رشتہ ہے. وصبت احمد ولدای منها فأيكم له سهم كسهمي، اور رسول کے جو 2 نواسے ہیں رسول کی بیٹی سے وہ میرے بیٹے ہیں، کسے وہ حصہ مل سکتا ہے جو مجھے ملا ہے۔ سبقتکم الی الاسلام طرا، ہم اسلام کی طرف تم سب سے پہلے آئے ہیں۔ غلاما ما بلغت اوان حلمی، اس وقت ہم اسلام پہ آئے ہیں جب ابھی بالغ بھی نہیں ہوئے تھے۔ مسلمانوں میں پوری بحث ہے کہ جو بالغ بچہ نہیں ہوتا ہے اس کے ایمان کا کوئی حساب نہیں ہوتا ہے، باپ کے ایمان پر اس کا حساب ہوگا۔ یہ فرسٹ ایکسیپشن ہے ٹو دی رول، جہاں علی کو کہا جاتا ہے کہ اول الاسلام قوما، جبکہ ابھی وہ سن بلوغ تک نہیں پہنچے تھے۔ صلوات پڑھ دیں ایک بار اور۔ پھر وہ فرماتے ہیں اس سے فَأَوْجَبَ لِي وِلَایَتُهُ عَلَيْكُمْ رسول اللہ یوم غدیر خم، اور رسول نے اپنی ولایت کو، اپنی اتھارٹی کو واجب قرار دی تم لوگوں پر ہمارے لیے۔ اور رسول نے کب یہ کیا؟ یوم غدیر خم، غدیر خم کے دن یہ ہوا ہے۔ فَوَيْلٌ ثُمَّ وَيْلٌ ثُمَّ وَيْلٌ لمن یلقى الالہ غدا بظلم، وائے ہو اس پر، وائے ہو اس پر، وائے ہو اس پر جو کل اللہ سے ملے گا میرے ظلم کے ساتھ جو اس نے کیا ہے، اس کے ساتھ اگر اللہ کے سامنے ملاقات ہوگی تو اس پر بدبختی کے علاوہ اور کچھ نہیں ہے۔ صلوات پڑھنے ایک بار اور۔ فلما قرأ معاویہ الکتاب، جب یہ معاویہ تک خط پہنچا اور ان اشعار کو دیکھا، اس نے اپنے آفیسر سے کہتا ہے اخفو ھذا الکتاب، اس کو چھپا کے رکھ دو، لا یقرأہ اہل الشام، کوئی شام کے سٹیزن کے تک یہ خط نہ پہنچے، ورنہ یہ ان کا رخ جو ہے علی ابن ابی طالب کی طرف بڑھ جائے گا۔ صلوات پڑھنے ایک بار۔ یہ وہ نور ہیں، یہ وہ خوشبو ہے کہ جس کو دبانے سے دبنے والی نہیں ہے۔ خداوند عالم نے قرآن میں وعدہ کیا ہے، اور صرف ایک مثال پر ہم ختم کرنا چاہیں گے صوفیوں کے حوالے سے۔ اکثر ہم لوگ دیکھتے ہیں مثلاً وہاں بھی ایک زمانے میں، ایک جنریشن پہلے انڈیا پاکستان میں باقاعدہ ایک مہم شروع ہوئی تھی۔ ان کا موضوع یہی تھا کہ ہر جگہ یہ بیان کرو کہ ابو طالب کافر تھے۔ اب یہ اتنا اہم مسئلہ بھی نہیں ہے، لیکن یہ اس لیے کر رہے تھے تاکہ علی کے نام کو ڈاؤن کرنے کے لیے۔ ابو طالب کا صرف قصور یہ ہے کہ وہ علی کے بابا ہیں۔ اس زمانے میں جو صوفی ایک نظامیہ سلسلہ ہے ہندوستان میں، دہلی میں ہیں یہ لوگ، ان کے جو پیر و مرشد تھے، انہوں نے جب یہ سنا تو جس طرح سے انہوں نے اس کا جواب دیا ہے بہترین جواب تھا۔ وہی ہم کہتے ہیں کہ خداوند عالم جو ہے علی کے نام کو اور علی کے بابا اور خاندان کے نام کو جس طرح سے پھیلاتا ہے، ہم اس کے بارے میں سوچ بھی نہیں سکتے ہیں۔ کبھی کبھی ہم سمجھتے ہیں ہم نے بہت بڑا کام کیا ہے، وہ کام ہم نے نہیں کیا ہے، کام وہ کرتا ہے، اور وہ کرواتا ہے اس طرح سے کہ آپ سوچ بھی نہیں سکتے ہیں۔ نظامیہ سلسلہ، یہ سب چشتیہ سلسلہ ہے صوفیوں کا۔ ان کے جو پیر و مرشد تھے، جب انہوں نے دیکھا کہ وہابیوں میں نے یہ پروپیگنڈا شروع کیا ہے کہ او ابو طالب کافر، ابو طالب، انہوں نے حکم صادر کیا، چونکہ صوفی مرشد کا حکم بہت اہم ہوتا ہے کہ اس سال ہمارے فالوورز میں جہاں بھی بیٹا پیدا ہو جس گھر میں، سب اس کا نام ابو طالب رکھیں گے۔ اگر آپ ریکارڈز کو دیکھیں اس زمانے میں چیک کریں تو دیکھیں گے کہ فراوانی ملے گی آپ کو ابو طالب کے نام کی۔ تو یہ بہت کوشش کرتے ہیں علی کے نام کو اور علی والوں کے نام کو دبانے کے لیے، لیکن خداوند عالم نے جو ضمانت دی ہے اس پر ہاں پورا یقین ہے، یہ پوری کوشش کرتے رہیں، لیکن یہ نور الہی کو کبھی بھی ختم نہیں کر سکتے ہیں۔ الحمدللہ الذی جعلنا من المتمسکین بولایت علی بن ابی طالب، خداوندہ ہم لوگوں کو ہمیشہ اسی صراط مستقیم پر قائم رکھ جو محمد آل محمد کا راستہ ہے، ہمیشہ ہمارے اس جذبہ ولایت میں تقویت پہنچا، اس میں کمی نہ ہونے پائے، اور عاقبت بخیر ہو، اس دین اور مذہب پر ہو جو ولایت علی کے مذہب اور عقیدے پر ہے۔ ربنا آتنا فی الدنیا حسنۃ وفی الآخرۃ حسنۃ وقنا عذاب النار برحمتک یا ارحم الراحمین۔